this is a big wake-up call for the SNP, because if these numbers were to materialise, then Humza is on a sticky wicket in terms of his role as First Minister. There's absolutely no doubt about that.
Polling. Let's do some polling, shall we? Because the Times reports this morning a new poll that shows Labour pulling away from the SNP, as Humza Yousaf said earlier in the week that a vote for the Greens, the Scottish Greens, in the general election would be wasted. There's a lot of electoral considerations today. Analysis by Professor Sir John Curtis, the polling expert from the University of Strathclyde, finds that Labour would win 28 seats in Scotland. The SNP would return 18. That's a fall of 30 compared with its 2019 general election result. There are two fewer constituencies in Scotland at the next general election because of boundary changes. Geoff, there's a lot of kind of electoral strategising to consider here. First of all, the poll. What do you make of it?
Well, it's interesting because it comes hot on the heels of two MRP polls done by Survation and YouGov, which are this regression polling analysis, which is meant to be a lot more effective. Now, one showed the SNP largely holding on to what they've got, maybe losing a few, 7 I think it was, seats, and the other one had the SNP more aligned to this latest poll, losing a hell of a lot of seats. Now, whatever one's views, I think we've all got to accept there is a downward trajectory in terms of the SNP's popular vote. Now, how that's extrapolated into seats is where there seems to be a bit of disagreement on all of this. But nonetheless, this is a big wake-up call for the SNP, because if these numbers were to materialise, then Humza is on a sticky wicket in terms of his role as First Minister. There's absolutely no doubt about that. So what we've seen this week is some interesting politicking between the two members of the Butte House Agreement, trying to Humza's claiming that a wasted vote, as you say, for the Green Party, that would be a wasted vote in this context. I can understand where he's coming from, but I thought it was quite punchy, given that he's relying on the Greens for his parliamentary majority. And then the Greens had a quick riposte back, saying that they're going to challenge SNP's ineptitude in certain areas. And I thought this was all getting rather interesting. I think there's an element of strategizing here, in the sense that they want to outline that a vote for one is not a vote for the other. I think there is an element of that. I just think the timing of that this week probably wasn't great in the context of the hate crime furore, in the context of other issues just now that we might explore shortly. It just kind of leaves the reader, the viewer, going, these guys can't even agree with each other. How are they going to be able to bring a compelling narrative to the people? So it's interesting. This one's going to develop in the weeks that follow. And I just want to, if I may, point out a by-election that's taking place tomorrow in Inverness, because if we look at the polls, they all tend to agree that the seats that are most vulnerable for the SNP are indeed in central Scotland, Glasgow, and in the west as well. But most polls show that those rural areas in the Highlands, in Perthshire and all the rest of it, are quite safe just now, or seem to be that way. This by-election tonight will be fascinating to see if the SNP can triumph. They haven't triumphed in a local by-election in, I think, over a dozen attempts in terms of first preferences. And the great kind of analysis from Ballot Box Scotland, I believe his name's Alan Falls, and I recommend him for anyone that wants to go in and learn about how local by-elections are manifested. It's fantastic stuff. He predicts that this leans SNP, which is quite something in this context. So look out for that result tomorrow, I should say, because that might give us an indication of how the people are feeling on the ground and what has to be a bankable constituency for the SNP if they're to succeed in the general election.
Just one extra wee note on that as well, because I think that inevitably we're going to get caught up a lot in what general election polling looks like, because it's a general election year, and quite rightly we should do as well. And this poll, had the SNP losing 30 seats down to 18, which is very consequential, obviously, and Labour winning. So we're right to concentrate on all of that. But in terms of actual impact on the ground here in Scotland, we have to keep at least one eye on Holyrood, because that's where potentially you're getting the biggest change that we've had at least since Alex Salmond and his chief of staff, can't remember what that guy's name was, but at least since they won the majority in 2011.
Very talented guy.
Yeah, very. And possibly the biggest election result of devolution, actually, because what it will do is completely change the nature of the debate and probably take independence off the table entirely if this result transpires at Holyrood. So, yes, the Westminster result is really important, but actually, let's not forget the impact this has on Holyrood, because that's really where the big potential changes could be made.
There's another note in the Times write-up of this polling, by the way, that I just wanted to mention. Sorry, Geoff. And it's from Ross Greer, the Green MSP, saying, the world is burning around us and sadly all other parties have proven unwilling to step up when needed to protect our common future, which the Times translates as, he's going to attack the SNP on its climate record during the election campaign. His partners in government.
Well, indeed, Calum, and it's notable that the Greens are going to be standing, I think, 32 candidates in constituencies across Scotland, which is going to cause a bit of difficulty, I think, for the SNP as well, because some of those Green votes might have been otherwise going towards the SNP. So I think it'll be interesting to see how relations continue going forward between the two parties. Now, I know we wanted to talk about other issues today, but one thing that I wanted to read out was an email we've had from a listener, because it does rather relate to what we've been talking about as regards Inverness, and this links to the wood burning stoves kind of controversy or furore that's on going. Now, there's a lot of stuff on X, formerly Twitter, that suggests that there's misinformation ongoing about this kind of new rules. There's other people suggesting that other politicians might be on manoeuvres about this, but nonetheless, there's clearly some confusion about this, regardless of your views on those opinions. And our friend in Tain, and I believe he must be linked to this industry, although he doesn't actually says that, says as follows, and please bear with me, because I think this gives a sense of how people on the ground are interpreting this and what the political ramifications of that might be. Yesterday, it all went mental as people in the industry realised that the rules had changed on 1 April to ban wood-burning stoves in new builds. So communication is a massive question here. Why didn't we already know? Did we already know? What was the roots of communication? My understanding was that the government had removed a previous condition that allowed wood burners as an emergency option, which is immediately strange, as wood burners are the emergency option in rural Scotland during a power cut, particularly when energy prices quadruple, as they have done in the past, or if something breaks. It's just our rural thing. They might be a luxury, aesthetically pleasing thing in urban Scotland. They are what we use as a rule. They need to have these plans fact-checked by a rural person before they leave their Edinburgh offices. But then yesterday afternoon, the Herald got a line, as I understand it, from the Scottish Government saying wood stoves could now be installed in new builds if there was an emergency need. So surely a power cut is an emergency. Surely that happens on a universal basis to all homes in an area. So surely that just means there's a universal exemption, as who knows when and where you'll get a power cut. And surely a universal exemption isn't a ban. So when is a ban not a ban? But that rather proves the point that there is confusion on the ground around the general population, particularly in that rural constituencies. There's legitimate concern. What does this mean for me, for my family, perhaps for my business? And I do applaud actually Patrick Harvey for trying to draw a line under it in terms of offering clarity, but it seems to me that that's almost inspired more confusion in terms of the communications around this. So I do think, going to my previous comments, will this sort of stuff, that sentiment, play in local by-election results that we might have tomorrow night, and indeed the general election later in the year, because the SNP need these seats if we accept that Labour are challenging them in their heartlands in the Glasgow and West Central Scotland, as I said earlier.
Thank you so much for watching. Press subscribe and you'll get all the best videos offering insight on Scottish politics delivered straight to your feed. Press subscribe and stick around. And if you'd like to hear our conversations in full, open up your podcast app and search for Holyrood Sources.